Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. A quick shout out to my latest reviewers, Doug from @NerdyExcursions, Mentally Insane from @Tasty_Doom, Dan from @Paleo_Gaming, and Rachel from @SingingFreely. Thanks you four for taking some time to let me know how you feel about the show. If anybody listening wants a shout out on my next episode, then go ahead and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and I will shout out your username. If you prefer for me to give credit to your podcast or your Twitter account or something like that, then let me know and I will do that. I want to give credit where credit is due. Thanks. And over this last week, How Not to DM hit 3,000 listens, which is an incredible milestone, and I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you listening and supporting the show, so thank you. A quick shout out to my 3 giveaway winners for my 3K giveaway: Justin @SkippyTPE, Mark @LugonThe, and Gavin @AgroSpirit. Big thank you to my partners at Adventure Dice. That's adventuredice.ca. If you want 10% off your order, go ahead and use my code HN2DM there. And big thank you to Amalia, that's @CastTheGreater on Twitter and Instagram, for helping me with that awesome art commission. So if any of you are looking for some art or some dice, look no further. And exhale. Okay, that was a lot of announcements, but we got through them together. Let's dive in. This week's guest is Weston, the dungeon maestro behind Arcane Anthems. Weston creates awesome free music for TTRPG creators to use in their podcasts, streams, or home games. He also posts hilarious parody videos of popular songs that have gone through his very special D&Dification process. Enjoy!
I actually started playing D&D in 2015, and it was when I heard Imager. I saw this post about these voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I thought the Dungeons and Dragons part was pretty nerdy, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't know, that's pretty nerdy to me." But I was really interested in voice acting. I had taken a bunch of voice acting classes, and I'd done commercial acting and stuff like that, so I decided to give it a shot. I even scrolled past it, and it was one of those things where I scrolled past it, then I was like, actually, and then I scrolled back. Little did I know that those couple of scrollbacks would have landed me where I am today. I discovered a love of the Dungeons and Dragons through Critical Role and the way that they kind of played it, and the role play aspects of it, and the world building. And I love rules. I think rules create a very fair playground for everybody. As long as everybody knows what's going on, rules can be fantastic. And so I, quote unquote, encouraged my group of board gaming friends. We had been getting together for a couple of months at that point, playing different games, and they were like, "Weston, that's too nerdy for us. Why would that seems like too much." And so I got a game called Mice and Mystics. That's a RPG in a box style game, and they loved that. And they're like, "Okay, we understand what you're talking about here. It would be really fun to make some characters and do this." And that campaign lasted for about 5 years. So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons as a DM, having never played the game before, only having been exposed to Critical Role, obviously Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, and the Adventure Zone, and just jumped in as a dungeon master. Before then, I was lead singer in a rock band. I don't mind being in front of people. I like it. I kind of thrive in that environment. I did acting in high school and past high school. It's just something that was missing in my life, was this role play aspect, was this acting aspect that Dungeons and Dragons gave me the opportunity to do, which has that now led me to all sorts of different things, making parodies on TikTok, making RPG music, and all these things we're probably gonna be talking about during the interview. But that's how I found Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, like you said, funny how a couple of scrolls has just totally taken over your life to this point,
It really has.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you and I, where it has influenced a lot of how we spend our time now. So you mentioned your first experience really playing was being the DM. So walk us through your first DMing experience, what kind of adventure you ran, how it went, what kind of good and bad things happened in that first session.
So I was a little bit intimidated by a lot of the modules that were out. I knew that there were tons of different modules out there, and I have mild dyslexia, so reading is tough for me to like sit down and like read for a long period of time. In addition to ADHD and like all those things, like it just, I struggle with that, with the reading aspect of it. So I decided just to do homebrew. So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons as a homebrew dungeon master, and I found that to be a lot easier. I think the first encounter we did was they were in this like agrarian city, and there was some like wacky stuff going on with these like scarecrows, and there was this like dream that they had, and they went and investigated the dream and found this like small shack and investigated the shack and met this imprisoned elf who convinced them to let her go. And little did they know that this was a hag in disguise that had been put there on purpose, had been captured and kept away from the town. And that led into a massive, 5-year campaign. They couldn't get enough, and we're still playing till today. So it was a great first session. I think they really enjoyed it, and it was one of those things that you did a good job, or that they enjoyed it when like the day after they're like, we have to play again. Like we have to do this again. This has to happen. They all really caught the bug.
Oh, there's nothing better than excited players. Even like right when you finish the session, everyone's just chattering about how fun it was or how they can't wait to do X, Y, and Z in the next session. Nothing better
Absolutely.
as a DM. That's like the ultimate payoff. Yeah.
Please, players, give your DMs validation. They need it.
It's true. It's true. What are some of the worst mistakes you've made as a DM, and what lessons did you learn from these mistakes?
So I think some of the worst mistakes that I've made have been thinking that my players would want to play Dungeons and Dragons the same way that I enjoy playing D&D, and that was a pretty big mistake on my part. Just assuming that my group of friends would want to do things in that manner. There's this kind of fine line, right, where I'm trying to teach them to role play, which I've never done before, which most people are really uncomfortable with. They haven't played since they were children. It's a very vulnerable thing to do with adults. And when you give yourself over to it, it's extremely rewarding. But some people just aren't comfortable doing that. And I had an experience where I kind of pushed one of my players to engage and to interact with this NPC who was like trying to coax them to do something. And this player ended up not liking the roleplay aspects of the game, and they were kind of there to roll dice and see the numbers go up and use their abilities and punch stuff and light stuff on fire, and like that's why they were there. And I didn't know that. They didn't know that. Like this was their first experience with it. This was my first experience with it. So I think having that discussion with your players, saying like, "Hey, this is the type of game that I want to run." At that point, I hadn't listened to any, like how to DM. Like I was just listening to the mechanical side of it, and then experimenting with the roleplay side of it, because that's what like was really interesting to me. And now we have so many more resources where like this session 0 is like a normal thing that you do all the time. Like 5 years ago, honestly, people didn't talk about session 0 that much. Like they just didn't. And now it's become mainstream, and that's great. Like those things need to happen, because you'll find some players who want to play in that style of game and some who do not. And you as a DM, you can make that decision like, oh, do I want to change the way that I'm going to DM? Or maybe, that player is just not right for my game. And that can be a hard decision to make, especially when you're friends with those people. But I always say that, and a lot of people say that no D&D is better than bad D&D. So you don't want to, make any of your friends uncomfortable or anything like that.
Yeah, great point. Great advice. I don't know if anyone's said that phrase on the podcast yet, but it is a common one, and it's very poignant. Funny that you mentioned that people haven't really been doing session 0s, or I mean, 5 years ago they weren't really doing it. I feel like that's a similar trend to what I've seen. And it's also funny that you mentioned like you were listening to the podcast, you heard the mechanical side, and you heard like the story that the DM was telling, but I think part of what's funny and misleading about podcasts is you don't see all of the behind prep work the DM is doing,
right?
Preparing all of the branching possibilities, and then the players pick one and they roll with it, or they're just really good at improv. So a couple of things that, same with me, listening to Critical Role and being like, oh yeah, I could do this, and then jumping in and being like, wow, they're not doing anything I expect. It's just a funny wake up call that a lot of DMs hit.
Gosh, that's my favorite part of it, honestly. That's become a very comforting thing. Okay, so I'm a bit of a over prepare, or I can be. And the fact that I can prepare a ton of stuff and very, very little of it is used means to me, it gives me freedom to me, because that means that no matter how much I plan for, it doesn't really matter that much because I'm going to end up improving things anyway. So I've started planning in a very different way. Like now I plan my games in these like segments. Like there are all these different puzzle pieces. I prep the hag. I prep the scarecrow. I prep the village leaders. I prep a roadside encounter. I don't know in what order those things are going to happen. I don't know how the characters are going to approach any of those things. And I try not to plan it. I just throw in those elements where they feel correct. And I tie them together with improv. And that's just the way that I do it. Like there's hundreds of ways to DM. That's just the way that gives me the least amount of anxiety and allows me to have the most amount of fun, and allows me also to be a DM that my players are never quite sure, is this improv or is this planned? Like they're never sure. And that's a great place to have your players in, because then they can they extrapolate all these other things that could be going on. And you're like, I'm going to grab that because that's a great idea. I'm going to grab this because that's a great idea. And yes, that's exactly what's happening. How did you know that? Man, you rolled so well. I'm going to tell you that you've figured out that that's exactly what's happening. And they feel smart and I feel smart, and it's a win-win. And as long as the players do not know that that is happening, and sometimes even if they do know that's happening, this like collaborative storytelling happens. And that's the best part about D&D, in my opinion.
Yeah, I prep very similarly to you. It's kind of like bits and pieces, and however I end up using them, that's kind of the win for me too. So yeah, like you said, lots of different ways to do it, and it's whatever you're comfortable with. But I think you and I have similar styles in that aspect.
I also think that it's just as important what things you don't use. Like making sure that like actually this, now that they've made the decisions, it doesn't make sense for this thing to happen. In music, at least I call that playing silence, where sometimes, like the bass guitar just needs to play some silence because it's not appropriate for that sound to happen. And the same thing in D&D, like sometimes you have to play silence on an encounter, or on the ziggurat, or on the sudden appearance of the BBEG or whatever it might be. Playing silence can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, it can. I like that. I haven't heard that in music before, but it makes a lot of sense. You don't want, John Paul Jones playing during the intro to Stairway to Heaven. So it's got to be when it's appropriate.
Exactly right.
So kind of digging more into particular things that have happened during your games or stuff that you really enjoy, what are some of your favorite monsters or encounters that you have created and thrown at your players that really challenged them or were a lot of fun?
I pride myself on running good encounters because I think that there is a giant weak point in D&D when it comes to initiative, when it comes to running encounters. I think that encounters can be slow. I think that battle can be boring, honestly. And I have really strived to turn battle into like a panic-inducing, wonderful, like tense. You're on it. If you're not on it, then guess what? Your turn's getting skipped because you were, texting somebody on your phone. Like I'm a very intense DM when it comes to combat, because that's to me where the game tends to slow down the most. I've created this like wonderful list of adjectives and verbs and things that I can use for like each type of damage, for each creature, for whatever it might be, so that the descriptive, the words themselves are powerful. I make sure that my players know who's next up, so that they are busy when combat is when it's not their turn, and that makes combat way more interesting, so much more in your face. That intensity happens, and then after that intensity, everybody kind of takes a breath. Like that's how I like to run my encounters. If I have a favorite encounter, I think one of my favorite encounters was when my players had just fought a bunch of different people. They were in the Underdark. They were going on this mission for who they assumed to be a prince, and come to find out, they meet a disguised young green dragon down there, and they have to kind of talk their way out of it because they were level 3 characters, and they eventually made friends with this green dragon, attempted to help this green dragon do a thing. Green dragon eventually gets on the throne of one of the biggest metropolises in the world here, and it makes for this like really like they could have attempted to kill that dragon, and they probably could have, but instead they went the diplomatic route, and all these things ensued because of it. And that came straight out of combat, and them feeling like they were going to lose. That fear of them losing their characters, losing their lives in that fight, led them to make some other decisions, which were really cool, like which impacted the world so prevalently.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I wanted to point out that your list of battle descriptions, you've made that available so people can go check out your account and find that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really helpful, especially when people get in the rut of, does this hit? Does that hit? You swing your sword, and like you said, combat can be very boring when it just becomes that instead of something more interesting, a puzzle to solve.
And it was a list that it was an incomplete list that I found on Reddit initially, but it wasn't very well organized. It wasn't color coded. It was really hard to read. It was just basically like text on paper, and the words were awesome. I really, really loved them a lot. So I have the Reddit user who was originally credited with that on there, but I've gone through and I've like redesigned it. I've added colors, I've added pictures so that you can very quickly find the elements that you're trying to describe. I've added elements that were missing. Psychic damage was one of them that was very like, it's hard to describe psychic damage, and so that list is very helpful to me. Or like force damage, that's a really like weird one to describe. It's just like eldritch energy. It's like hissing core, like it's a very strange energy to describe. So also describing enemies' health without saying, oh, they have 20 HP out of 80. Like that doesn't mean anything narratively. So you want to kind of give those things narrative context. So like if they're how do they look when they're at half health? How are they acting when they're at half health versus full health versus on death's door? So I've found those things very helpful, and I wanted to put them out in a way that DMs could very quickly find a word, describe an action in a really like visceral, writery kind of way, as opposed to using the same, and this shock of energy, and you send out this lightning bolt, like you just re-describing the same spell. I found it very helpful to make combat a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, it makes it much more cinematic, which is, I think, what a lot of people strive for when they're running the games. And so, yeah, I think it's a great resource. So everyone should go check that out if you're worried about your combat descriptions getting a little stale. Okay, so favorite memory of improv. It could be combat, could be roleplay, could be anything else that you just completely had to pull out of thin air because your players took a left turn you weren't ready for. That was just awesome.
Oh man. So the best thing about Dungeons and Dragons is the group storytelling, right? So I love it when my players own the world. And for me, it's all about connecting them and grounding their backstories in the world. So I always have them meet NPCs. I always have them meet their brother, or I have them meet their old friend, or the uncle they hate, or the shopkeeper that taught them magic, or like I'm always trying to ground them in the world. And I had this one uncle where the player's character hated their uncle, like always just hated him, and I was like, I can use that. They added this aspect, right? And so the uncle ended up they were like, this uncle is evil, this uncle is bad, just because they didn't like him. And I use that to my advantage by using that as kind of a red herring. So because they didn't like the uncle doesn't mean that the uncle is evil. It doesn't just because you don't get along with somebody doesn't mean that they are a bad person. So, some people just don't get along with each other. And so instead I twisted that a little bit and gave them the surprise of their life when it was actually the aunt who they didn't mind so much. The one who they kept ignoring despite all these different things was the one in disguise, was the one working for the big bad evil guy, was the one who was pulling the strings all along. And they kept attributing all this stuff to the uncle, because the uncle was the one they didn't like, when in fact all these things that were happening that they could blame the uncle on, it was the aunt the entire time. And I used that to my advantage, and we had this like really intense moment where she takes the she was given the mace to enchant from this player character, and she uses it to kill the uncle.
Oh
as
man.
as they're watching it, all this stuff happen, and it was just a great moment. So that manner of storytelling, when your players inject their backstories into the world. I love it when they're like, oh yeah, we went and visited Mother's mole warehouse, and and I was like, oh, what do they sell at this place? Like I love it when they can create elements in the world and all of a sudden that's real. And oh yeah, over the past couple of weeks I've been talking to this peach salesman, and then we go off and all of a sudden we're on an adventure, selling peaches. Like that's the adventure now. So that's the type of improv that I like to do, when the players really attempt to own the world and own their backstories and inject information into the world, and we make it work together.
I think a lot of good DMs will tell you exactly the same thing, that you let your players help you in the world building, either whether it's them doing it, taking their own initiative and doing it, or it's you saying, what did you find here? Or, what do you see? Or what does this person look like? That kind of thing. It helps them, like you said, feel grounded and immersed and feel like they have an ownership in this story that you're all creating together.
That's my favorite part of improv, is that is that, oh, okay, that's a thing now, and I write it down, and I'm like, I'm gonna develop that a little bit later. That's definitely gonna come back into play.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Are you looking for a map for your next tabletop game, book series, or video game? Nerd Dad Maps can hook you up. Whether you're playing in a fantasy, sci-fi, or modern-day game, or looking for world, city and town, or battle maps, email nerddadmaps@gmail.com or visit them on Twitter @nerddadmaps to get started. Let Nerd Dad Maps help you explore your world. So let's transition now into your main project here, Arcane Anthems. We'll definitely talk about whatever other projects you want too, but tell us about how Arcane Anthems started, where you got the idea from, that kind of thing.
So I'm a longtime musician. Before I found D&D, I was in a couple different rock bands, the lead singer in a rock band, songwriter, engineer. These days, musicians and most artists have to do everything kind of themselves. They have to be their own social media managers. They have to do everything yourself. So I took on the role of many different hats, and I had the engineering role as well, where I bought all the gear and did all the YouTube tutorials and learned and did terrible music and then got better and better. So that's kind of where the music side started. I've been doing music since I was 16, recording stuff since I was 16. And that side always fascinated me, that sound engineering side. So I've been doing that for about 20 years now. But the D&D connection didn't really happen until I started playing D&D, and we had a really intense session where one of the characters died. And I stayed up till about 2 a.m. writing this song about that. I just sat down to my computer because I was feeling all these emotions, and sat down and wrote this song. And then I was like, if I can, like, I've never written songs about Dungeons and Dragons before. Like that was new to me. And I, sent it out to the group and they really liked it. And then I was like, oh, I want to do a song for each one of these characters. So I started kind of learning orchestral composition. Like I don't really play piano very well, but I was like, well, I guess I'll do a piano piece here and I'll throw in some violins here. And I looked up like how to organize orchestras. And this all came from, I had a buddy of mine want me to do a score for film, or a short film he was working on, and I attempted it and I tried it, and I couldn't do it. I failed miserably at it, trying to come up with this score, and it didn't work. And this was kind of years before my D&D experience. But then I was like, oh, I really wanted to learn how to make orchestral scores. Like I really, like, that is something that is in me, and I know that if I try hard enough that I can do this, and if I learn the right skills I can do this. So this was that opportunity for me, and my first couple songs weren't great, compared to the stuff that I do now, but they laid a really like solid foundation. I did a song for each one of the characters in the campaign, and then I thought to myself, I wonder if other people want music for their characters. And I thought, like, why wouldn't they? Like, Darth Vader has a theme. Like you hear the Harry Potter theme or the Avengers theme or the How to Train Your Dragon theme, or all these really amazing stories have these amazing themes that immediately like inject that emotion into you. Like it just wells up inside of you. We know that songs can do that for us. It takes us back to our middle school. It takes us back to when we lived in that, moldy smelling, apartment. Like whatever it is, it takes us to those places and it makes those moments for us. And I thought, yeah, I think this is missing in the D&D community, these like custom anthems for people. So I started doing that under a different moniker. And then a couple years after that, I changed the name to Arcane Anthems, a name that I'm much happier with, that I think is way cooler. And with Arcane Anthems coming out, I started doing Patreon, and I saw a need in the community for royalty-free music that could be used in Twitch streams and podcasts and on YouTube, and like where content creators were making content. They were great storytellers, they were amazing writers, they were great actors, but that doesn't make them good musicians too. Like we all can't be great at everything. So I started doing Arcane Anthems to give music to D&D and to creators, for creators to use in their creations, whether they're filmmakers, whether they're, they don't have to be playing D&D per se, they can be doing other things, but that's kind of where, I've gotten, reached out to by many like video game developers and things like that who want to use the music. And I'm like, yes, like do it. That's what this is for, to make your job easier so that you can focus on creating the games you want to make. And I can help you to mold the music. I can do what I do best. You do what you do best. And then together we make something greater than the sum of its parts.
Recently, you've posted a few videos about that, like people asking about doing it in video games or whatever, that kind of thing. So the follow-up question to that, if people are interested in including your music in their stream or their podcast or other content like video games, that kind of thing, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to do it, and I guess there's a lot of different answers for this one question. First off, I think the only stipulation that I have is credit me. Like that's, and it doesn't have to be like a big deal. You don't have to take 10 minutes talking about Arcane. Like that's what I'm talking about, like a blurb in your bio information, or if you're doing a video game, add me in the credits. Like as long as you aren't taking credit for the work that I've done, then we're cool. Like that's it's under the Creative Commons attribution license, and it's such a powerful license where as long as you're giving me credit, like make what you're gonna make. And a lot of people have been like, well, how are you gonna make money on that? and this is my full-time job now. The community has been super supportive, and obviously there are different things that you can get for supporting me. It's the base music that's free, and in the same way that a YouTube DM makes great DM content for free, and they put it out on YouTube for free. They then also have Patrons on top of that, or like a Patreon on top of that, where they can add in other rewards. I have other rewards on my Patreon, which kind of leads me to my second thing, is like, how do you use music in your campaign? I know that a lot of people are online right now, and they think that that's not possible. They don't think that it's possible to use music in your campaign. And so I've done a lot of research into it and figured it out. And I mainly play through Discord. So there's this really great little bot called Groovy, and you can add him to your Discord channel. And with Groovy, you can actually use a command to play a playlist, like a Spotify playlist or a SoundCloud playlist. So I've added all of my music to Spotify and SoundCloud, and I have done the work for you. You can go to Arcane Anthems on Spotify, you can go to Arcane Anthems on SoundCloud, and you can find the playlists that I've already made. When you're starting out with music, there should be two playlists, and that's it. There should be a out of combat playlist and a combat playlist, and that's it. Like, keep it simple. If you're using an out of combat playlist and then a combat playlist, you're going to find that your games feel so much better. And the music doesn't even have to be loud. But for me, when I don't have music going, I start to get very anxious. I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I have different mental disorders, and if I don't have something going kind of in the background, I start to get very anxious. But when I do have music, I can really stay focused in the game. My brain can kind of latch onto that. So I found it very like cathartic and very helpful to have those things. And I know that music isn't for everybody, and that's totally fine. There are people with auditory disabilities and, hearing loss and those types of things. And I'm not saying that it's the perfect solution for everybody, but I think for most parties, you could benefit from having some music in the background. And I've tried to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, definitely, groups with people who are neurodivergent, or groups who have people who just feel more immersed when they have the music playing. I know it kind of does both of those things for me too, right? It helps me focus and helps me just feel like I'm wherever, we are during the game. And so I know I definitely, like, I have a few different playlists of different places where we might be, like the tavern and the this and that. If you've already uploaded the music to Spotify and to SoundCloud, then yeah, it's really easy to set up Groovy. Like you said, it's just a couple of simple commands. The couple of games I've played on Discord have used Groovy, and it's really easy. So yeah, you guys should go check that out. Try it out.
Yeah, and there are obviously other bots too that you can get onto your servers that are music oriented, but I've just found Groovy works great. And by command, we're not talking about like learning coding. We're talking about dash play, and then you paste in the link. Like that's as sophisticated as it needs to be. And there's a couple other commands you can use, but yeah. So I'm glad. I'm glad that there's other people who are using that same solution. That's fantastic.
So you have a Patreon, and you kind of alluded to a couple of benefits above and beyond just the free base music that you produce. So what can people get from becoming a patron of yours? How do they support your work in that way, and what do they get in return?
So first off, they get a lot more free music. This is my full-time job now. This is what I do. So the more support that I get on there, the better able I'm to spend more time doing more free music. So that's the first thing that anybody who supports me gets, is knowing that they are helping more free music happen in the community. From there, you can get things like loops, so that you can have one song just looping. And if you run a podcast and you want to have a battle go a little bit longer, then you just loop it out. You just loop it. Makes it way easier to use all these songs kind of mindlessly. Like, oh yeah, I like that one. I'm gonna loop this for 10 minutes. And it will be great. And I make them so they're all seamless. There's no clicking, popping, cracking. Just feels very normal. I also have these little loops that are like smaller little sections of the song. So you can go in and you can rearrange the entire song however you want. If you want the ending at the beginning, you can do that. If you want the beginning in the middle, you can just move all the stuff around and you can paste them in. Just like they're tiny little loops now that you can then use. Or maybe you want the middle of combat to, this little intense section to last a little bit longer. You can then kind of interject some of those smaller loops into the bigger loop and have the fun go for just as long as you need it. And then we get into really kind of crazy stuff like the Midi files. So all the different notes, you can turn a violin into a synthesizer. You can turn a flute into a drum, like whatever you want it to be. I have all the notes and everything, all the different melodies and the harmonies all laid out for you. So you can transform my fantasy combat theme into a sci-fi horror theme if you want, just by switching up the instruments. And then obviously I also have the audio stems, so you can like just have the violin playing for this moment, or just have the violin and the cello. So you could have this like what would normally be an epic combat song, getting rid of some of the percussion, getting rid of some of the doubled instruments, and all of a sudden you have what would be playing in a tavern, just a couple instruments. So these types of things are make the music way more versatile than just having the song. Then this one song becomes, I can switch it into a sci-fi theme. I can switch it into a tavern theme, in like 10 minutes. Like, it doesn't take a long period of time to do this, but I want to give that over to the people who support me.
Yeah, and especially the people who are interested in getting that custom with it. That's a really cool option for people who really want to dig into that. For people who are less confident with their ability to mix and to move stuff around, can they commission pieces from you custom?
Yeah, so I still do custom work. The work that I do tends to be very particular. What I have specialized in is making about like 1 minute long anthems for people's games, for people's characters, for people's villains. I try and keep it very succinct, because I want those things to have a theme. I want you to play that and your players to panic. I want you to play this thing and your players get like excited that they're about to play this game. This is their theme. This is their heroic moment. This is their Imperial March, or their, like I want them to have that. where they hear that theme and it's theirs. This is us, everyone. So I have gotten very, very good at using melody and percussion to produce anthems. And when I say an anthem, like your campaign's anthem is this. And when I work with my clients on that, so that they have, like we were kind of talking earlier about, they have their theme, their anthem, their memorable. Every time they hear it, they get hyped. Like that's what I want to create, and it's different for everybody. Like even I think the last couple months I've done so many different pirate themes, and they're all different, and they're all fun, and they all feel different because the people who are creating these are having me draw from different places and draw from different characters and different elements. A sea shanty is very different than a pirate combat theme. Like they all sound very unique and very different, but it's fun. Like that's where I draw my inspiration. Again, one of the other things that my patrons get is they have the opportunity to suggest themes for me to write, and then some higher tier patrons to vote on what I actually do every month. So that interaction, that inspiration is, I think, what was missing when I was in my rock bands, when I was doing other music. I really struggled to write music. Now I've written like over 150 songs or something in the past couple years, and that was not doable before. And I think now it's doable because I connect with people, and that's the most powerful thing about this entire game, is the ability that it has to connect people, to build stories together, to inspire each other. That's what Dungeons & Dragons is all about to me, and that's why for me music was such an easy add-in, because that makes writing music for me fun and interesting and engaging. Is not just me doing it for me, but me connecting with somebody else and trying to come at it from a new perspective, trying to look at music. What does this dragonborn monk who has a broken arm, like, what does that sound like? And that's a fun challenge. And for me, that's a worthy storytelling goal.
What's your favorite way that someone has used your work thus far?
What is my favorite way? I think I love it when people create intros to their campaigns on Twitch. So they'll add even more elements to it. People have used my music for animatics, which I think are so cool, where they'll have, a bunch of their characters running around with swords and daggers and fighting a beholder, whatever it might be, doing those things with my themes in the background. I find it so satisfying to hear that people are using the songs in their home games. That's really why I did this. It's because I wanted people to be able to up their game. I wanted Twitch streams to sound more professional without having to go through all the rigmarole of licensing and royalties and worrying about getting their Twitch channel muted and all these things. I didn't want people to have to worry about that, and that's why I jumped into these things. And every time I hear a song, every time I see a song on TikTok where somebody's using my audio in the background, or I see a Twitch stream using the music as the background music, it's always like whoa. It's cool. It's wild to hear other people's voices on top of something or my music lifting amazing role players, whatever it might be. That's the most satisfying.
You talked about doing parody videos as well, and TikToks and stuff like that. So where does your inspiration come from for those?
Oh gosh. I think it's like every meme in the D&D community, and I'm just like, I'm looking through other creators' videos for like, I haven't done a video on how a nat 1 can have you roll down a cliff. I usually have people ask me like, where do you come up with this stuff? Well, normally what I'll do is I'll say that's a cool song, and if the song is popular, if the song is going to connect with people, because people like to hear things they already know, and I like the song, then what I'll do is I'll find an instrumental version of it, and I'll then go in and see what works. Like usually I'll just start like throwing in like rhyming words and like what the cadence of the song is, and like I just recently did a cover of Stay that Justin Bieber was on and one other artist, and so I just went in there and I was like, things that rhyme with stay. I just go in there and I start that, but I get I can make any song about anything. Like, honestly, it doesn't have to be, Stairway to Heaven can only be about, the celestial plane. Like, that's not how this works. Like, I can incorporate any song into any D&D topic. So that is both very freeing and also very intimidating, because, like, could I have done a better job if I thought to go with this other idea? Yeah, probably. Like, maybe those rhymes would have gone better, or, whatever it might be. But I just find them really fun. Like, I just think they're so much fun because I don't get to sing as much anymore. So I wanted an outlet for that. So I decided just to do parodies, and then I get to sing literally all the time, because that's something that I love doing, is singing on tracks. That's what I grew up doing my entire life. That's what I thought I was going to make my living off of. And to some extent I kind of have, which is cool. More people have found me on TikTok than have found me anywhere else. And I pretty much owe the TikTok D&D community, like, the reason I was able to quit my job and do this full time. And so I'm very, very appreciative to those parodies, and to people that people like my silly songs, and try not to take me too seriously. And I've gotten a lot of, like, dumb comments from people who don't appreciate the silliness or the goofiness, who think I'm ruining the community with with my parodies, and I don't think that's the case.
What other projects are you working on right now? I know you do some one-shot streams.
Oh man, so I try to keep my head above water with Arcane Anthems. Making music is my main deal. That's what I do. I showcase the music that I make on Tuesdays, Pacific time, on my Twitch stream, where I bring in other popular or not so popular D&D creators, and we all play Dungeons & Dragons together, and I have the music playing in the background, and they're all amazing role players, and they're just a ton of fun, and I usually leave them hanging because I like to have my 3-hour cutoff. I don't want to play super long games, and I know that they're busy people, so I respect their time. But Arcane Refrains happens most Tuesdays when I'm not busy doing other things with family, or with this job, like I will be tomorrow night, unfortunately. But
is it
most
5 p.m.,
Tuesdays,
6 p.m.? Sorry.
Yeah, 5 p.m. PST,
Okay.
Pacific Standard Time, when these games go on. I am gathering people for another game that is called One Shot 101, where I take non-D&D creators and I introduce them to the world of D&D. And every week we make their characters. So there's a group going on, and we will create their characters on stream. And then they'll each go. So that'll be about 3 weeks of character creation. And then on the final week, we play a one-shot together, and they play their first D&D game together on stream for everybody to see. And it is a marvelous experience watching new players learn the game from I tend to kind of host the show, and then I bring on these coaches who coach them through the making process, and we help them, and we really, like, make sure that their characters connect with them. And seeing how they embrace it every time is the most rewarding thing. I mean, this game is so good. It's so good when it's done right, and I love to show people how much fun it can be when you have the right group and we have the right people. It's magic. It is pure magic.
Yeah, it is. That's an awesome idea. I'll definitely be tuning in to the games when I can, if it's going to be a bunch of new people. Something I love about playing with new players is they think of things that old and jaded players wouldn't think of, right? The old and jaded players are like, oh, it's probably this, it's probably that. They have a bunch of ideas already in their head about what to expect and what to do. But new players see it in just such a different way that's hard to describe and really hard to replicate, but so fun to watch.
I think my favorite realization is that moment when they're like, oh, I can do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you can try to do whatever you want. That's what makes this game amazing. It's not, you're on a beach and you're stranded there. What do you want to do? Well, I guess we go looking for survivors. I guess we go, what would your character do at this point? Would they make a shelter? Would they try and find food? Would they explore the island? Would they, explore the deeps? Would they, jump into the waves and see what they can find? the world is kind of their oyster, and that's a really neat moment. And when you find the right people who are already entertainers, who are already amazing creators, they tend to just suck that stuff right in, and right into all the creative juices start to flow. So
Yeah, for sure. I know you're also playing in a game that's being DM'd by Dice Cream Sandwich at Gen Con coming
that's
up,
right.
so that'll be pretty fun.
That'll be the first time I've ever played live in front of people, and the people that I'm playing with are amazing. I'm playing with Corso. I'm playing with Sarah is Coffee. I'm playing with Dice Cream. I'm playing with One Shot Questers. I'm I'm just if I'm being totally honest, like, these are all my friends. These are all people who I have known in the community for 2 years, who I just adore. Like, I absolutely adore these people, and they are so talented and endlessly entertaining, and I cannot wait for that show. So if you are going to Gen Con, please stop by on Friday. I think it's called D&D TikTok plays D&D or something like that.
Yeah.
So that'll be it's gonna be wild. I'm super stoked.
I'm assuming they're also going to record it, so it's up on YouTube later. But
Gosh, I hope so.
yeah, same. I hope so, because I can't make it to Gen Con, unfortunately. But if you can, you should go check it out. You've kind of talked a little bit about just all the great friendships you've created, all the cool people you've met since kind of really delving into the TTRPG community. But what's been your favorite part about it, do you think?
Honestly, I think my favorite part is welcoming in new people. When I see people who are making really quality D&D content, I love to reach out to them, and I love to say, hey, there's this whole community here. 99% of them are really great, and I want to introduce you. I want to introduce you to them because these people have gotten me through the pandemic. I think it's been difficult on everybody for all sorts of reasons, but being able to hop in a Discord call with these people who genuinely care for each other, who genuinely want to see each other succeed, and support each other. And there's been drama in the D&D community, but honestly, the majority of it is people just wanting to support one another and wanting to create worlds with one another. And that is powerful. That is everything. I think my favorite thing is that I get to choose, from the best of the best to play D&D with. That's what an opportunity. I mean, some people really struggle to find a good group to play with. And I think the internet and the pandemic has put everybody online in a way where it's oh, I can find other great people to play with. I don't have to, suffer through my, ex-boyfriend's, mother-in-law, who's our DM, who I don't really like, but I play because it's D&D. Go find a group, go pop onto a D&D Discord. If you've never played before, you can find people who are going to teach you. It's so accessible now. If you want it, you can have it. I think that's easily my favorite part about this community.
Yeah, it's almost, I don't want to call it the golden age because I don't want to jinx it, but it's a very different and new and exciting era of TTRPGs for the exact reasons you stated, right? Technology has made it so that you can play with anyone, anywhere, so long as you've both got internet, and you can make friends all over the world. You can play with really cool people from cultures you've never even thought about, and you can create really strong and meaningful bonds with all sorts of people that otherwise you would have never met in your life. And that's something that's really cool to me.
I've played with people in Sudan. I've played with people in Australia. I've played with people in Sweden. I've played with people in the UK. I played with people in Canada. It's when you say everywhere, you are not kidding. It's literally everywhere. If you have internet, then you have Dungeons and Dragons, and you have the ability to play in a group that is safe, because you deserve to play in a group that is safe, that is accepting, that is super creative, and that will play in a way that works for you. You can find your people.
I'd love to hear your words of wisdom and encouragement for DMs, and then for people who are looking to start creating content, or who are creating content and need some advice and some uplift.
I think the best advice I can give to new DMs is to not worry about the rules so much at first. Worry about the story you're telling. Worry about the people who are in your campaign. And if you're building your own world, then connect the backstories of your players' characters to the world. And you'll have them. Like, you'll have them forever. When their characters are invested, when they can see that, oh, my DM cares enough about me and about what I've created here to add them to their world, it changes everything. Like, oh, this is personal. We're going on a quest to find my mom. So I always encourage new DMs to take what their players have given them in form of backstory or character and use it. Shoot arrows at monks. Like, let them be the heroes. And that doesn't mean they always win, but that means that they're always growing and that they always feel like they have value. So do those things that are going to help your players feel like heroes, help them feel connected to the world that you're building. The rules will come and you're going to get rules wrong, and that's okay. Like, that's going to happen. Still learn the rules, but you're going to get so many rules wrong at first that that's not going to be what keeps bringing your players back to the table. It's rolling dice, it's seeing what happens, and it's them investing in the world that you create.
Yeah. And for content creators,
what do you love to do? Like, what is your favorite thing to do? Not necessarily in Dungeons and Dragons, but in general. I have seen people who've combined their love of fitness and D&D. I've seen people combine, all sorts of things. If you're an artist, oh yeah, we got room for you in D&D community. If, like, whatever it is that you like, if you're an engineer, holy cow, like, we need you. If you're into coding, we need you. Like, whatever it is that you do, if you're into accounting, yeah, you're super good at spreadsheets, we need you. Like, whatever it is that you do that you are good at, the D&D community can use, and you can provide added value to the community. And I think that is, if you're a writer, whatever it might be, I think you get my point.
Yeah.
The community can use you, and you can use your talents to make the community better. And if you believe in that and you put yourself out there, I'm not saying that you're going to have hundreds of thousands of followers, but I'm saying is you are going to discover your people. Like, you are going to find your people. And that is, I think, as like humanity, that's one of our like goals in life, is to find our people, is the people who support you, is the people who love you, not just for, the things that you do, but they give you value as a person. Like just finding value in that. So use it as an opportunity to find your people. And you're going to find some people who aren't your people. And some people who aren't your people are going to find you. But those aren't the people you have to worry about. The people who are your people are the ones who are going to make you what you inevitably become.
Those were amazing words. Thank you for sharing those. I can tell that you really meant them, and they're coming from a very real place. Where can people find your work, and what are your social accounts, websites, etc. to plug here?
I've tried to make it as easy as possible. You can find me literally everywhere at Arcane Anthems, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, on whatever social media platform, on Spotify, on Apple Music, whatever it is, Arcane Anthems. You can type it into Google and boom, I'm there. I was lucky enough that name was very available to use. So you can find me all those places. If you would be so kind to support the work that I do and you want to gain access to the music and all those things, you can head to Patreon, patreon.com/Arcane Anthems. And there you can download all the MP3s for free. If you support, then you gain access to the Discord, where we talk about music, where we talk about all sorts of D&D related fun things. And you can gain even easier access to the music. We have like lists that are set up there, so you can quickly go through and download everything. That's where kind of the community resides, is on the Arcane Anthems Discord, and that's $1 a month. So if I don't even know what you can buy for $1 now. Like, I don't even think dollar menus are even a thing anymore. Like, that's cheaper than pretty much anything that you could possibly even try to purchase. So if you wouldn't mind sending that silly money to me, then I can keep doing what I love to do.
I really have enjoyed your work thus far. It's been fun watching your parodies, but also delving into some of the, more serious stuff, the music that you've written and that kind of thing. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my time, and I will definitely be watching out for any other cool things that you and the other creators cook up.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to How Not to DM. I've been getting more and more kind, encouraging, uplifting messages from listeners lately, and it really makes all the work behind the scenes worth it. A few last things before we wrap up. I still have a few ad slots open here and there, so if you're interested, message me and we'll work something out. My intro and outro music is by my good friend Torin, aka Mr. Tape. Check out his music on Spotify or Apple Music. And, as always, until next time, roll some nat 20s for me.